All right, welcome into the latest episode of Starting Nine on 5R. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at 5 Reasons Sports on Twitter. Also, you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 5 Reasons Sports if you're still using Facebook these days. We are sponsored as always, and we'll get to the guest and everything else we're going to talk about today, which is going to be Heat related, of course, because I really can't depress myself this early in the morning about the Dolphins. So we're going to go Heat heavy today with Gad Carnagena. Before we do, though, I want to tell you about another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, particularly of this show. It's our friends over at BetUS. That's right, BetUS.com. The code word is 5. This is where you want to go to play all of the sports. You can do NBA, NFL, MLS, just about anything. You do the live betting. That's my fun way to play, is kind of get into a game and kind of see how it's going and decide whether to go against the trend or not. You can also do the parlays, just about anything. You can do the futures. They have everything at BetUS. And again, if you use the code 5, that's FIVE, you get 125% bonus. They don't have a ton of rollovers, so you'll actually get your money relatively quickly. Some of these places, they make you roll it over like 65 times, and you never see your money. You forget about your money. You forget it's even in your account. That's not going to happen at BetUS. So go to betus.com, use the code 5. I can tell you that the Dolphins are 13.5-point dogs the last I checked against the Bills. So it's up to you. I'm feeling pretty good about my Panthers over pick for the season, though. 100. I think it was 100.5 points. 100.5 points. And they may get to that 3/4 of the way through the year. The Panthers, of course, are 6-0. So go to BetUS, and of course, you can also bet the Heat game against the Nets on Wednesday night. All right, let's get to it today. I was at the arena last night with Brady Hawk, actually his first time covering a regular season game. We have all the coverage for you on the 5 Reasons Sports Twitter. Also, we did an episode of 5 on the Floor where Greg Sylvander joined us. And we got into 3 things last night in particular. Jimmy Butler's kind of bounce back game, 36 points against, let's just be honest. Orlando is not good. They're intentionally not good right now. They're rebuilding kind of from scratch. They don't have, with the exception of Terrence Ross, who somehow went 0 for 7 against the Heat last night. Usually he's like 4 for 7 from 3. They don't really have any of the players who gave the Heat trouble in the past. And hello, Germany. They don't have Fournier. They don't have Vucevic. Jonathan Isaac's out. Aaron Gordon's in Denver. So, not a real formidable opponent, game that the Heat had to win. But we still found 3 things. One, of course, was Jimmy's bounce back. The second was Hero, who, couldn't shoot straight the whole night, but found other ways to contribute. Ended up leading them in plus minus and had 9 assists. And I saw a lot of growth in his game during this game, because you got to play well in other ways. And I thought he was actually pretty good defensively last night. You got to do that stuff when the shot's not going down. And I thought he made great reads when they kept sending 2 to the ball, 3 to the ball whenever he had it, and kind of getting him off of his spot. He made the right read time after time. And that is not something that he did last season. And then the third thing we touched on 5 on the Floor was the fact that they have to get bench production from at least one other guy every night. Okay. So it can't just be Tyler. So Max Strus was kind of reluctant to shoot, and they got it from Markieff Morris. He made his first 6 shots. It made you feel a little bit better about that 4 spot, which I still have some questions about. But today we're going to focus on a little bit more specifically Hero, Butler, Bam. And what I want to get into is how they find a balance, because with really good teams, okay, that have, 2 or 3 or 4 guys who are capable of giving you 20 on a given night, that's critical. In other words, finding a guy who, if someone else doesn't have it going, one of your other guys does. And of course, the big 3 were sort of the hyper example of this with the Heat, right? Because LeBron pretty much had it going every night. Dwayne, by the time he got to kind of year 2, year 3 of the big 3, we know that he was in and out of the lineup. He wasn't quite the same player. The knees had kind of gotten to him. He actually rebounded more later in his career. But if you go to that first season in which they struggled at times, we know they started 9-8. LeBron and Wade were often sort of trying to operate from the same spots. It was a little bit clunky. And Bosh was trying to find his way as a third guy after being a first guy. But what you found as the season progressed, and when they hit that run, when they won 21 out of 22 that first season after starting 9-8 with the struggles in Dallas, that, they could lean on one guy to carry them for a period of time, right? Like if LeBron was kind of working his way into a game, which he sometimes did, kind of like Jimmy does now, that maybe Dwayne would carry a little bit early. Or there were games, I mean, there were games that both of them were out or one of them was out that Bosch carried, or they had Bosch time, right? Remember that at times Spoelstra used to throw Bosch out there with 3 or 4 subs to just let him sort of operate as the first option, and maybe Chris would carry them for a period of time. Well, that's the balance that these 3 guys need to find. And I'm excluding Kyle Lowry from this because I kind of feel like he's on his own island. Like, we know that he's going to help everybody play better. I was talking to Greg about this last night, and even to George Sedano as he made his way in. He decided to grace us with his presence from Los Angeles. That with Kyle, it's almost like it's sort of almost an invisible thing. Like it's not a stat sheet thing, okay? And it's not anything particularly that you're watching. It's just the way he makes his teammates feel, right? Like it's hard to put it into words. Like Bam and Jimmy just seemed more relaxed last night, particularly Jimmy. It's like, I don't have to do everything. I have Kyle. You do it. You bring the ball up. You make the hit ahead pass. You make sure Bam is aggressive. It just feels more comfortable. Also, obviously, defensively, although he's not what he was. I've been watching him carefully. He's not what he was. But Kyle's a better defender than Goran was. See, even at this stage. So you don't have to cover for him as much. So Jimmy can play center field and he have 4 steals in the first half, right? I mean, he's just roaming. He's just a menace. He's as good as anybody going on the nail, going from end to end on defense. So just having Kyle makes them feel more comfortable. So I'm going to exclude Kyle from this because honestly, I don't expect there to be many nights where Kyle carries offensively. I don't think that's what they want from him. He's done it. We've seen it. He did it against the Heat in the playoffs. He's done it at various times during his career. I mean, I saw him drop 43 points in Kyrie Irving's face, basically, when they were playing the Cavs, when Irving was with the Cavs with LeBron. He's capable of scoring. We know that. He's a very efficient 3-point shooter. We really haven't seen that yet. I feel like he's still finding his shot, finding his legs. He's short on a lot of shots so far. But there will be 20-point nights for Kyle, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of them. It's really about the other 3. It doesn't mean that Tyler Hero is part of the Heat's big 3 at this point. I still would put Lowry there, but he is part of their big 3 scorers. I mean, I projected him to lead the team in scoring. I don't know where it stands now. I'll have to take a look because obviously Tyler had just 13 last night and Jimmy had 36, and Bam's been a little bit more consistent. But I do believe that Tyler's going to be in that conversation the entire year because I think he's going to have some games in the 30s and he's going to have some games in the low teens. But he's going to be in that conversation. But the 3 of them playing off of Kyle, how do they find that balance of, okay, this is the guy who's got it tonight? Because I feel like that was part of the struggle in Indiana. They didn't have Lowry to kind of orchestrate. And so at the end of the game, when it was clear that Tyler was the one who had it going, Jimmy kind of went back into his old role of trying to save them at the end, and it didn't go very well. And as Tim Reynolds tweeted the other night, it honestly hasn't gone very well most of the time. I think the perception of Jimmy down the stretch of games has been better than the reality, kind of like it was for Dwayne the last few years of his career, kind of like, and I've said this on 5 on the Floor, and I know you're not allowed to say this these days, but kind of like it was for Kobe for his whole career. He was really not that efficient down the stretch of games. Hello, Ray. And yes, they are going to be fun. So the 3 of them, I think, have to figure out, okay, who is the guy tonight? And again, Kyle's going to help them with that. But last night, I thought that they did a really good job of that. Like, I felt like there was growth in that area. It was clear from the beginning that Jimmy just wanted to go, right? He's 13 of 17, but he started fast. I mean, he had a line at one point that I haven't seen from him in Miami. I think it was 18 points, 1 rebound, and no assists. That's not like a typical Jimmy Miami Heat line. That's a line of Kyle's back. He's going to handle this thing. I just had a bad game. I'm going to go. And he did. And Tyler didn't force the action. That's what I appreciated. I think we all kind of want Bam to force the action as much as possible because we want him to go to that instinct instead of his other instinct, which is kind of, okay, you guys do it. I'll do everything else. That's not what people want to see from Bam, right? But I do think that Tyler and Jimmy found a little something last night. And that's, I asked Jimmy about it after the game, about Tyler with the ability to make better reads now. And Jimmy's face kind of lit up, I think, because I do think it matters. I think as Tyler starts to get more attention from defenses, which is what happened last night. I mean, they were throwing to at him all the time. I mean, off the catch, when he had the ball, out of the pick and roll, trapping him. I mean, they did not want Tyler Hero to beat them. Now, I mean, think about that. You've got two guys on this team who've been all-stars. They're max players, right? You've got another guy you just paid $30 million a year to. The guy they didn't want to beat him last night, the two guys were Duncan Robinson, although we're going to talk about that in a second, and Tyler Hero. They did not want Tyler to beat them last night. That was the coaching strategy that Mosley, he's a new coach, but I mean, he's very well regarded. Probably should have been hired by a team earlier. That's the approach that they took last night. We're not going to let Tyler beat us. And you know what? Tyler helped beat them, but he did it differently. His shot was not going, but he got off the ball. He got off the ball. He got it to somebody else, and he allowed them to make a play. Made a great drop pass to Markieff Morris. I thought his passing was excellent to Jimmy. And so there is growth there. There's growth. And so that is kind of what I'm going to be watching. I know people have concerns about this team, and I'm with you, Raphael. Happy that Tyler had an off night in scoring, but still impacts the game. Exactly. That is what did not happen last year. I think, the frustration with Tyler last year, okay, other than some of the off-the-court stuff, the frustration with Tyler last year wasn't statistical. His stats were fine. I mean, per 36 minutes, he's pretty much the same player except for the dip in three-point shooting, okay? His assists were a little bit up. His rebounds were a little bit up. His overall scoring per minute was the same. But he didn't impact the games when he wasn't scoring. And he also didn't have, I think part of it was aesthetic last year with Tyler. His rookie year, he had these flourishes. He had these moments. We've talked about this on 5 on the Floor, like the Philadelphia game and others, where he just took over. He was just like, he had that bounce, and it was just get out of Tyler's way. He didn't have those kind of games last year. So it didn't look the same. Well, he's already had a couple of them this year. And I thought actually last night was one of his more impressive performances because he did not play well in terms of shooting, but he did everything else well. I thought his defense was good last night. And the other way that this affects the Heat going forward is that we have seen that teams will overplay Duncan Robinson. Like that is like half of the purpose of Duncan Robinson, like $9 of the $18 million that you're paying is simply for him to be a decoy. And I know that drives some Heat fans nuts, okay? And I know, like our friend Hot Take Harry and others on Twitter, like, why are you paying this much to someone who's going to be a decoy? But it has value, okay? The way that teams play Duncan opens things up for Jimmy and Bam, who are not natural scorers, right? They're not natural scorers. Jimmy is not as natural a scorer as, say, Paul George. He's just not. Bam is not as natural a scorer as Joel Embiid. They need a little bit of help to open them up. It's not that they don't have some skill sets to score, but it's not their natural thing. Neither of them, like Jimmy, again, Jimmy went to a community college before he transferred to Marquette. Bam was never the best player on his team growing up. I mean, they're not lead scorers. They never have been. So you need something to help them. And Duncan is kind of he's the release valve because defenses fly to him, right? But Duncan's not shooting particularly well right now. What I'm curious about, that's a good point, Ryan, a constant threat that must be accounted for, as long as he's making shots. Now, last night he started 1 of 7 from 3. What I want to see now is the added attention to Tyler positively impacting Duncan. Can it go the other direction? Because our guy, Sean Rochester, and you should follow him at Sean Rochester NBA, he tweeted out some numbers this morning. And this is early, really, really tiny, small sample size theater, right? But the starting lineup so far, okay, when they're all together, is a plus 20 net. When you sub Hero for Lowry, it's a minus 20 net. Now, again, tiny sample size, but I understand it. Playing Hero and Robinson together has always been tricky. So I don't know how much Duncan's going to be able to take advantage of it, because I don't know how much Eric's going to want to play the two of them together. But when he does, there should be a little bit of a release there for Duncan. And I'll just say this, there needs to be, because the expectations for Duncan Robinson have changed. Okay. He's not the cute, story anymore. He's paid like a quality starter in the NBA. Not overpaid. I wouldn't say that. But he's paid like a quality starter in the NBA. So he needs to be a guy you can count on 2 out of every 3 nights to give you the production that you're anticipating, which is, 3 or 4 threes and doing some other things too. And I'm with you, TJ. They are scared of Duncan going off. But that's what I saw different last night. Orlando wasn't as scared of Duncan going off. They were scared of Tyler going off. That's a big development here. All right, we're going to get to Gad Cartagena here in a second. You can catch him on Full Court Press here on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. By the way, thanks for 14,000 subscribers. Let's get this thing to 15,000 here by the end of the year at the very least. So mention it to your friends. Obviously, we tweet out all the links, but you want to get everything as soon as it comes out. Subscription certainly helps with that. So before we get to that, I'll tell you about another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. It's our friends over at U-Brake Wheel Fix. You need look, your wheels got to look good. And we know in South Florida that a lot of times they don't, right? Because the roads suck. And actually, one of the roads that suck is I-95 right about Golden Glades, which is pretty close to where you can find U-Brake Wheel Fix. They're right there in North Miami in the Miami Shores area. You can get your wheels polished. You can get a refinish. You can get them coated. But also, you get the really cool colors too. You can still do the Vice colors there. They did not ban the Vice colors. The Heat are not doing the Vice colors this year. In fact, we'll have some news for you Friday about kind of what's going to be going on with them. But they don't have the Vice colors anymore, but you can get those. Of course, you can do the aqua and orange too for the Dolphins, although I might wait on that. Just a suggestion. Of course, you can do they can do the Hurricanes colors too. Mark who runs U-Brake Wheel Fix is a big Canes fan, so we feel sorry for him. But they've got over 5,000 custom colors, and they do just about everything for you down there. They do great work. It's just cool to watch it actually too. It's sort of how they put it. They do the pickup, they do the drop off. They make everything really easy for you at U-Brake. Okay. Plus, if you mention 5 Reasons, you'll get 15% off your entire order. Whatever it is you want there, they'll take 15% off. Just mention 5 Reasons. If they don't know about it, tell them to ask Mark. Okay. All right. U-Brake, wheelfix.com. That's where you go. Check it out on the website. All the information about hours and the call number and everything is there because I'm 48 years old and my eyes don't work so good anymore. All right, let's get to Gad. We've got Gad Cartagena. He joined us. It went so well that we brought him back. Well, actually, the reality is I forgot that I was doing the show. And at about 11 o'clock last night, we have a Heat thread that sort of goes back and forth all night. And it's like, anybody want to join me tomorrow? And Gad jumped up.
I'm in.
And you're in. That's it. That's all. That's the screening for this show. That's pretty much how this works. Yeah. It's kind of like with 5 on the Floor. Like, it's funny to me that like Royal has like a post game show sheet, and like some of the people actually have show sheets. Like literally our pod. Okay, 5 on the Floor is all right, guys. We're gonna pod at 8 o'clock tonight. Okay, 7:59. We all get on, and I'm thinking this, and this. Let's go. And that's how we do things. Yep. But I did want to get into something more specific with you today that we did on 5 on the Floor, which is kind of this balance that I'm talking about, because we see that look, there's some teams that are going to be top heavy, right? Like really top heavy, like they're relying on one guy to give them scoring in a given night, and you can win that way. You can. There have been teams that have won that way. There was a certain team in Chicago that won 6 championships. Those with one guy leading them in scoring probably 95% of the time, and another guy leading them the other 5% of the time. So you can win that way. But we've seen also that recent champions, and look, the Lakers were top heavy with 2 guys winning a championship a couple years ago. Milwaukee, I would say, 1 and then kind of 2 others who would give them something, but you knew who the lead dog was. But we saw Toronto win a few years ago, and there were nights Siakam was the best guy in the playoffs. There were nights that Lowry was the best guy in the playoffs. It was not always Kawhi, particularly from a scoring perspective. For you, what would be the best balance for this team from an offensive perspective?
Kind of what they've been doing. The only thing that's lacking right now is just getting the 3-point shot to fall. But what Tyler's been able to do in not just being someone who can put the ball in the basket, which we've known he can do, but now he's doing it at a more consistent rate and he's getting to his spots much easier. It's a much cleaner game for him. He is just a winning basketball player is what he looks like right now. And that being the case is going to be huge. So there's going to be nights where you're going to need more points from Tyler. There's going to be nights where you need maybe a little bit more playmaking from Tyler. You need a bit more defensive energy from Tyler, some rebounding. And he's kind of doing those things that you need from him. So him emerging as that kind of guy is huge. And outside of that, offensively, really, I think they're playing fine. It's just the 3 ball is not falling. So it looks much, much less cleaner than it will once the 3 ball starts falling. They're, I think, 24th in 3-point percentage right now, with about like 31% from 3. And all of our high volume 3-point shooters are shooting under 35%.
Right.
Tyler, Kyle's shooting 16%, Duncan's at 32, PJ's at 25, Strus is at like 30. It's not pretty from a percentage standpoint. So once that turns around, which it will, this offense is going to be humming, and it's going to be really fun. I mean, it already is really fun to watch, but it's going to be they're going to be a pretty decent offense. Ethan, you are on mute. You are still on mute. Oh, he doesn't know he's on mute.
Now I figured it out. All
There
right.
we go.
Do you know what? There's a lot of people who wanted to do that to me through the years. I thought you did it to me, Manny. I was like, what, did I say something I wasn't supposed to say?
That's an Adam thing to do.
Oh my God, yeah, that's may he rest in peace. How is Adam, by the way? But anyway, so yeah, that's one of the things that I wanted to get into was the 3-point shooting. I felt like last year they were completely relying on it. Like it, and when it started to go south, because they had been relying on it the previous year, the ball movement led to 3-point shots, and they had more 3-point shooters the previous year. I mean, Jay, went on that ridiculous streak. Obviously, even Myers Leonard, in that year early on, shot the ball pretty well from three. They just had more outlets to go to from a 3-point shooting perspective. Last year, it tanked. Hero in particular, but with the exception of Duncan, pretty much, and maybe Goran, most of the team. I mean, Nunn got it going, but again, there was not a lot of consistency from Nunn because he was kind of in and out of the lineup. I feel like this year, though, like it's not necessarily a loss, Gad, when they shoot poorly from three. Like, and it was last year. I mean, they started 2 of 16 last night. Now I know they're going against a team that's probably going to be one of the 3 or 4 worst teams in the league, but it's still they found other ways to get it done. And I think when we talk about balance, part of what I'm talking about is offensively is this idea of, okay, there are 3 different guys, maybe 4 different guys who can get them 20 on a given night, who they can kind of ride for a period of time, right? But it's also about the balance of the types of shots that you're getting. And I feel like this team, with Tyler's development in the mid-range in particular, I think that really, really matters. The floater, which he's getting very comfortable with. Obviously Jimmy closer to the basket. You like to see him, be more efficient from deeper, but I'm not anticipating it. And Bam kind of, finding more and more spots on the floor because he's not stuck doing the dribble handoffs every single game from the exact same spot. I feel like there are more places they can get offense. I'm not just talking about from players, but simply from spots on the floor. And then also, Ged, I feel like they can get baskets in transition this year, which is the other thing. Like, if they if they generate 13, 14, 15 fast break points in a game as opposed to 7 or 8, I mean, that's the difference between winning or losing a lot of these tight games. And Kyle last night, the hit ahead to Bam, it's an easy 2 points. That they didn't have that in their arsenal last season.
Yeah, no, it's definitely diversified, and they really can get to their spots almost everywhere. And you see Tyler's capable in the mid-range, Bam's capable in the mid-range. Jimmy, although there's this conception or this perception that he's really not capable in the mid-range, he was our best mid-range shooter last year. He's really solid in that area. It's just there's moments where it bottoms out and it looks really, really ugly. But then you have nights like last night where it looked fantastic and he looked like the guy that was in the bubble in the playoffs. That was he could get you 20 from that spot in one night. So having those 3 guys to get you spots on the floor where teams are willing to give you that shot at all times. You can on almost every possession hunt a mid-range shot that works. And then you have the complementary shooters. You have Tyler, you have Duncan, you have Kyle. Those 3 are capable of going off from 3 any given night. And then your bench players kind of also fill those spots a little bit. You have Dedmon who can roll. You have Strus who can spot up from 3. You have Markieff who takes some clunky shots, but when it goes in, it looks pretty. So last night was one of those nights. So you have everyone kind of has their spots on the floor. It's just a matter of making sure that they're taking the right shots, but it's definitely more diversified than it was in years past. And it's going to be huge. It's definitely going to be a big development for this team. They can get to their offense much easier than they have been in years past.
Yeah, you mentioned Morris, and I feel like we're kind of watching him adjust to the Heat, in slow motion here a little bit. But it's coming. Even just looking at him, he looks a little different than when he first arrived. I did not first time I saw him, I was like, that's not heat shape. That's not going to happen right now. But it looks like they've kind of worked him into heat shape. I know behind the scenes they're happy with the work that he's put in, which is positive. I think a lot of it with him, and I think what's going to frustrate Heat fans about him is that he can look really good doing certain things, but he's the type of player who then wants to do other things that maybe he's not as good at. I don't really like him as a spot up 3-point shooter. Brady has harped on that. I feel like as a roller, he's much more effective. I think, again, he is the type of guy. They're just looking for pretty much every other night for him. Can he give you double digits every other night? I feel like if he did that, like that would be fine. But that gets into the whole idea of the bench, because until Oladipo comes back, and whatever Oladipo comes back, and talking about a guy that needs to get into heat shape, okay? Because I think there's an assumption, right? Yeah, I mean, there's an assumption with Vic that, like, okay, it's just about the quad, and then when he gets the quad's fine, it's going to take him 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, he hasn't played. I mean, since when? I mean, when that injury happened before, prior to the playoffs last year. I mean, he hasn't played. He hasn't been, I mean, I watch him before games and he's shooting, but he's not running. I mean, he's shooting, he moves around a little bit, he bounces around, he talks to teammates, but until he comes back, they need, we talked about this last night, they need a second guy every night off the bench who at least can give them something, right? I mean, it can't all be Tyler. I want to see Max Max is a really nice guy, okay? And I almost feel like he doesn't want to step on toes there. Like in Summer League, he's just uncorking it, right? He doesn't care. He's the guy. But here I still feel like he's trying to find his role, right? I mean, can they, I don't know, can they get where they want to go if they don't have somebody helping Tyler off the bench?
It's not going to be pretty. Even with Tyler's development, it looks like it's a huge leap that he's taking right now. But no, I think you're going to need at least one of those guys to give you production every night. Now, it doesn't need to be like, what did Markey finish with? Like 16 last night or close to it?
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be 16. It can be like 8 from Dedmon, 6 from Strus, and 4 from Morris. But you just need probably around like 15 or so points from those other guys, because I think Tyler's going to be able to get you to 18 to 20 on most nights. So, I mean, 35 points from the bench, that's fine. We can live with that given how good the starters should be. But yeah, to your Strus point, him and Duncan both just look tentative when they're going up for shots. Like they're not as free-flowing, gung-ho, we're just going to take every single shot as last year. And maybe that's been drilled into their brains like, oh, we can actually get better shots now, so you don't need to take those shots. But I would like to see them just be a little more loose when they're taking their shots, because they're capable. They can give you 40% on high volume any given night, but they're just not taking it right now. So it looks a little bit weirder. But I think those two, increasing their volume and shots and also just being more efficient, is definitely going to make those bench problems kind of go away a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, but I don't think that Spoelstra's not the type to tell them don't take the 3, take a better shot. I mean, he wants. I mean, if they're out there, and I can tell you that the man in charge, who I get the sense it was, well, not just get the sense, I knew this, but then when I asked him a simple question about Duncan, he gave me a weird answer. I get the feeling that Duncan's a little bit on the spot, I think, with this organization going forward. It's like, okay, they paid him the money because, in this economy, a shooter of that quality is worth that amount of money to a good team. Okay. So they did it because you're not going to lose the asset. You want to keep the asset. They like him. He's a great success story for them. But at the same time, like, he's also a movable contract. Like, it's not that, right. It's not that crazy a contract. And his contract is more movable than Tyler's because it's worth more. And so if you're trying to get a star, one of the things Greg and I are kind of pivoting on, and maybe Tyler's not the guy that you use to do it. Maybe it's Duncan. And for that reason, he's an interesting guy to watch this year. Like, there has to be more to his game. Like Brady and I were watching the first like 5 minutes of the game last night. We're like, he's getting cooked on defense right now. And there are times he looks better on D, but there are also times where he struggles or he's afraid to foul. The one thing that he can't do, Gad, and then we'll finish this up after the break. The one thing he can't do is be reluctant to shoot. If he does that, like that's it. They're going to be out on him because that is the thing that he's there to do. Because we know, and even Riley said it, and I was stunned. He said this in what was a very innocent question I asked him, and he had this whole thing ready to go, was like, Tyler's a more multidimensional offensive player. Okay, I mean, it's true. I was not expecting it to come out of Pat's mouth in an answer about Duncan Robinson. So Pat always tells you what's on his mind. It gets out eventually. He's not, he can't hold it in the whole time. All right, we're going to get to one more thing here with Gad before we do. I want to tell you about another great sponsor, and that's our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Yes, the year-long drafts are over with, but they have nightly drafts now. You have nightly drafts. You can play against your friends, okay? Every single night, 5 RSN, 3 people, 6 people, 12 people. Make the games more interesting. They got the NFL, but of course now they're doing NBA. That's why we're pushing it here. It's just a great platform. And here's the thing. If you sign up with the code 5RSN, that's the code 5RSN, not only will they match your first deposit, they're going to give you $10 to play with. They're going to give you $10 to play with. And a lot of these games on Underdog Fantasy are like $3. They're $5. So you can actually just play 2 games. They don't take very long. I mean, some of them just take a few minutes. And you could just, you can test your knowledge against your friends, against the board, whatever it is that you want to do. They got the up downs. They have everything there. And they got round the clock support, and your money is secure. Okay. So go to underdogfantasy.com. That's underdogfantasy.com. The code 5RSN. Get your free $10. All right, let's close here. The Nets are coming up on Wednesday. Obviously, prohibitive favorites along with Milwaukee in the East if things are right, but things don't look right. And to me, it's more than Kyrie. I don't think they're going to be a very good rebounding team. I know that Steve Nash has harped on this a little bit. Like, they are not. I don't know. They're like, for all the talent that we talk about on that team. They face some challenges this season. I think with or without Kyrie, and I don't think the Heat are afraid of them. And I actually think that even if Kyrie is back, the Heat are kind of designed to beat the Nets, like in the sense of they have elite defenders at the key positions. I mean, at least you have a guy that you can put on Kyrie. You have a guy that you can put on Durant. You have a guy that you can put on Harden, right? I mean, on paper, do they look better than the Heat? Probably, but I don't think the Heat should be scared of them.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Especially without Kyrie. I think Kyrie's the X factor, because as much as I love Kyle as a point of attack defender, you can put any defender in the entire planet in front of Kyrie. Say for a guy like Bam, you need someone who's like long, really strong, really athletic to be able to kind of get him off his game, because he gets to his spots easier than anybody maybe ever in the league. Like, he's just so ridiculously talented. So he's the X factor. And then you have Harden, who, I was saying this last night on the post-up show, he kind of looks like he lost half a step. I know, like, the foul thing is one thing, and maybe that's getting him off his game. He's still an elite 3-point shooter. He's going to be fine from that aspect, and a playmaker, rebounder. He's going to fill up the stat sheet, but he doesn't look like that transcendent offensive player. Granted, it's just through 3 games, so we'll see if he ends up turning it on. We know Harden is notorious for not showing up in shape. But if he's not James Harden, the guy that they traded 8 picks for, and they gave up Karis LeVert and Jared Allen, that changes the dynamic in the Eastern Conference, I think, completely. With or without Kyrie. Obviously, with Kyrie, they are still prohibitive favorites. But this is definitely not the same team. And I know Kevin Durant might be the best player in the world. They don't have very good role players. You're hoping to get a lot of things from their team. But the difference between them and the Heat, neither team is really deep. But the Heat at least have, like, their top 3 role players are really, really, really good. The Nets have about like 1, maybe 2, depending on Joe Harris that night. Patty Mills is reliable. Everybody else is kind of a question mark. And then, like you said, they have the wing defenders. They have the switchable defenders. They have the interior presence to be able to give a team like the Nets problems. So, yeah, I personally would love to see this series in the playoffs, and I'm really excited for this game on Wednesday.
Yeah, and you mentioned about Harden. I do think, and not showing up in shape, and I think what we may be starting to see is the wear he puts on his body when he's not on the court is going to affect him later in his career on the court. I think there are a lot of things that are coming, that and the rule changes, which, even watching last night, and Jimmy, as Spoelstra said, they weren't concerned about Jimmy because he's not a quote unquote flopper, which he's not. Okay. But he also does get certain borderline calls that he's not gotten through the first 3 games. I mean, Jimmy, for as well as he played last night, like, he did that on his own. He didn't do it at the line. Okay. And I think the officials in the league are serious about this thing. So it's going to be interesting to me, to see if Harden gets back to that level. He'll be great, but I don't know if he'll be like like you said, transcendent like he needs to be. We'll get out of here on this one. We always appreciate the donations. Thank you, Ryan. Is Brandon Knight in our plans as a backup point guard? Well, I will say I hope so, because I know Brandon pretty well. He's a fellow Pinecrest guy, and pretty much he turned the Pinecrest basketball program into a bunch of 5'8" Jewish guys into something that that was actually something you would go watch. There was no room. When I used to go watch him at the gym, because I covered him a little bit when I was in the Sunset, I'll go over to Pinecrest. Pinecrest had this tiny little gym, and it's like people like out the door to watch Brandon Knight, who also, by the way, was taking AP history classes in 10th grade. Okay, I mean, just really, really bright kid. But it just didn't really, I mean, other than making a lot of money, it didn't really work out in the NBA for him so far. Do I think he could be their backup point guard? He's never really been a traditional point. I think that's part of the issue that he had, along with the injuries and I guess getting dunked on, which is what all anybody remembers now. But I will say this, okay, and this is no offense to Gabe Vincent, but what we've seen from Gabe so far, if Brandon Knight can get back to the level that he was at when he was, I don't know, scoring 18 with Phoenix or Milwaukee or any of those teams, I mean, you'd look at him, I would think, as an extra guard. I mean, and the Heat have resurrected players with less talent than Brandon Knight, okay? A lot less. You're talking about a former top 10 pick who was a one and done at Kentucky. So it's interesting. I think it's interesting. And I think the fact that they took him, I know they wanted Zaire to end up in Utah, so they weren't going to take Zaire anyway. But let's be honest, and again, no offense to Dwayne, Brandon Knight is a better pro prospect even at this stage than Zaire Wade is. Okay, so I didn't have any issue with the Heat taking him 6th. And of course, there's a local story, and Brandon told me for years that he wanted to play in Miami. So here's his opportunity. He's going to be certainly motivated. Gad, we appreciate it. Check out our sponsors, UnderdogFantasy.com. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the code 5RSN. Also, BetUS. Use the code 5, FIVE. Dolphins 13.5-point dogs. So pound the Bills on that one, of course. We know the direction that you need to go. And then, of course, our friends over at Ubreak will fix. Have a good day. I'm not muting myself again, Manny.